I'm going to give it 2 minutes. Is that okay? We're starting 5 minutes later than with those. But I'm also going to go till 20 after. So I can do arithmetic. Welcome to morning tuning. You came to your banjo players, so therefore.
Morning tuning is a little lower than evening tuning.
Right. You know what they call it when 100 banjo players go over a cliff? A good start. People are rude about banjo players. So, are we going? We going? Are we rolling? Are we happening? We're happening. Good. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Morningsong. You're also going to hear morning tune. Not just morning song, but morning tune. I'm going to start off with something kind of gentle because it's early, and I'm not ready for big boisterous yet. How about y'all? It's still morning. I'm going to do this little tune I made up. I call it Michael. I was at a banjo camp up in Massachusetts. And there's a great banjo player who lives in Chicago whose name is Michael Miles. And Michael plays a pretty specific style. And I came up with this little melody came to me, and I said, wow, that sounds like some of that stuff that Michael Miles plays. So let's call it Michael. So there you go. My wife helped me decide on that name. She's good at that. Come on. That's better. Here we go. Kentucky, a little community called Daisy, Kentucky. His name was Roscoe Holcomb. Roscoe Holcomb Roscoe Holcomb, to listen to Roscoe Holcomb, you need to be ready to listen to Roscoe Holcomb. Roscoe sings in a really high-pitched voice and is as feral in old-time music as you'll ever encounter. But you got to be ready for it. You don't want to just happen onto it by accident. You want to go and specifically listen to it. But Eric Clapton says that Roscoe Holcomb is his favorite old-time musician. So, actually his favorite musician. So there you go. He did this song called Hills of Mexico. And it's akin to the song that Bob Dylan did, Buffalo Soldiers. And I have, researching it, I found lots of other versions of it too. Barker's Creek, it's called. It occurs over in Madison County, North Carolina, under that name, Barker's Creek. George Landers, I believe, sang Barker's Creek. I've also found versions of it that were called Boggy Creek and Baugus Creek, which is kind of cool because I'm Riley Baugus. Good morning. So I'm gonna see if I can remember the words. There are some, and I know a few of them, and we'll see how many of them I can remember. Mexican cowboy comes stepping up to me, saying, "Can I hire you, young feller, or would you love to go and spend a season working with me in Mexico?" Well, I having no employment back to him to say, "It's according to your wages, according to your pay. Well, I'll pay you good wages, offer you from to and fro, if you'll spend a season working with me in Mexico." trouble's just begun. Through the thorns and the thickets, them cattle they did run. Through them thorns and the thickets, them cattle they did run. It was there upon old Barker's Creek we decided to go home. So we stepped on board a steamship. How them bells they did ring, them whistles they did blow. How them bells they did ring, them whistles they did blow. When they got forsake old Barker's Creek in the hills of Mexico. Thank you. That's fun. Now I want to do that. Now it's time for something a little more raucous. I come from over further toward the center of the state than here. I'm still in western North Carolina, believe it or not. I'm 4.5 hours away northeast, and still am in Appalachia. I live near Winston-Salem. That's the closest big-ish place to where I live. I'm about 30 minutes from Mount Airy, North Carolina, Surrey County, and that's where a ton of old-time music comes from. That's where a large part of the old-time music revival was happening. People were coming down from the north and from all over the world to visit an old man named Tommy Gerald. Tommy Gerald was a fiddle player and a banjo player and storyteller, and he worked for the state of North Carolina for 40 years as a motor grader operator. He drove a motor grader for the Department of Transportation and never had a driver's license of any kind, North Carolina or otherwise. He never had a car. He drove his motor grader to work and then back home every day. And that's how people could tell when he was still working. That's how you could tell when Tommy was home. The motor grader was sitting out in front of the house. But he had a cousin whose name was Fred Cochran. Now, Fred was one of those local sort of characters. You know how every community's kind of got its characters that people sort of pay attention to. Well, old Fred always wanted to be, he was the only one from the area who really made his living as an old-time musician. He wanted to be fiddling Arthur Smith, but he was just too steeped in the music of the Blue Ridge. He didn't have those clean notes on the fiddle, and he just didn't have that. But he was a great entertainer, and he traveled around making his living. And a lot of the places people had to play back in those days were work camps, where just tons of men would come together to do some task. Like you had punching camps where they would turn logs they would split logs and make punching floors. and you'd have coal camps up in West Virginia where people would gather and they'd mine coal. Because you have to move the coal above ground too, so that took a lot of labor, a lot of manpower. So Fred would travel around to these work camps, and in those work camps, other musicians would come as well. So he learned a lot of music in those camps, and he would bring it back to our area in Surrey County. Well, this is one of the tunes that he brought back. It's called Roustabout. Banjo this week has been tuned 63 different ways to Sunday, and it doesn't know where it's supposed to be. But I'll tell you where it's going to be right now. Laying right down here on the floor, because I'm going to do something different. I'm going to sing you a little song. Let's see, where's it at? Now there's a great ballad singer who was collected by Frank and Ann Warner, who were wonderful, wonderful they were actually wonderful collectors of music, and there's a lot of music that we have because they went around and found these folks and made recordings of them. They were so interested in folk songs and ballads. They spent lots of time in all over North Carolina. There's a great collection called the Frank and Ann Warner collection, and it's all still available for download and on CDs when you can find that ancient technology. If you still have the ability to play those old discs, you know, those little, they called them compact discs. Remember those? I still have some of that ancient technology with me this morning. Actually, if you still have one of those archaic players that you can pop them in and spin them around on and listen to them. Let's see. So, Frank and Ann Warner collected in North Carolina over around Beech Mountain a wonderful gentleman whose name was Lee Monroe Presnell. And he was a great ballad singer. And he was in his 70s when they collected him. And he said he'd always been a primitive Baptist, and that he didn't know anything for sure, but he had a hope. And I always thought that was just such a great way to look at everything. You know, I got a hope. I got a hope that what I believe is true. And oh, no wonder I can't find it. It was hidden. So he did this song that comes from over in England, and it's called "Farewell to Old Bedford," and it's pretty much. We only have 4 verses of it in his version, and it's pretty much a young man's entire life boiled down to 4 verses. He starts out and he talks about how he's having to leave everything behind. He doesn't have very much, but what he has, he calls his own. So this is like a young man leaving home for the first time. And the reason he's leaving home is because his parents are demanding things of him. So he's had enough of it, and he's taken off. Well, then later on, he pretty much becomes a drunkard and tries to enjoy every little speck of life he can. But then in the last verse, he's an old man, and his fingers are frozen. He can't move, nothing, you know, he's just gotten old and can't go any longer. So it's called "Farewell to Old Bedford." Farewell to old Bedford, I'm bound for to leave you. Likewise those pretty girls I never more shall see. My portion is small, but I truly confess it. What little I have, I call it my own. Well, might I have enjoyed it all in pleasure, if my cruel parents had left me alone. I will drown away sorrow with a full flowing bumper. I'll drown away sorrow in a bottle of wine. 8 drams a bottle is, and I don't care for folly. Now never let troubles come into your mind. I'll drown her away with a full flowing bumper. I'll drown away sorrow in a bottle of wine. 8 drams a bottle is, and I don't care for folly. I play on my fiddle and dance all the time. But now my fingers are frozen, my bow it needs rosin. My soundpost is down, and my bridge it won't stand. There you go.
So was that uplifting, Tom?
Oh yes, very uplifting. Well, it is in the beginning.
Yeah.
Oh man. So I've been traveling around with this fellow. I understand that you guys kind of have a book club around here. We recently read a book that I've been involved with. A gentleman from over around Greensboro, North Carolina, named Eddie Huffman, wrote a book about Doc Watson. And Eddie has long been one of our good reporters around the Greensboro, Winston-Salem, High Point, North Carolina area. And he decided that he was going to write this book about Doc, so he started interviewing people who knew Doc Watson. Well, he called me up one day. He said, "Well, Riley, you knew Doc. You were friends with Doc. What can you tell me?" So we got together a few times and had lunch, and he did some interviews, and we had a good time. And I got some nice meals out of it, which was important. No, but since the book came out, Eddie's been having me go out with him when he does readings occasionally, and I'll tell a few Doc Watson stories and play a few Doc Watson tunes, or tunes that we learned from, that Doc was famous for, or we might have learned from him. There's one I always loved that was, I didn't really totally get it from Doc, but it's one Doc did. It's Tom Dooley. Tom Dooley was a fellow who supposedly murdered his fiancée or girlfriend. I don't know if they were engaged to be married, but I thought they were. Over in Wilkes County, North Carolina. And Tom Dooley was charged with the murder and was hanged for it. But then seems that later there was a third lady who was a lover of Tom Dooley who seemed to, on her deathbed, confess to the murder. Her name was Annie Melton. It's kind of an 1800s love triangle, if you will. But it became famous because of the song that was collected from Frank Prophet, and then who was from over around the Beach Mountain area, and then made famous by the Kingston Trio. I think it came out around 1959 on American radio. It was a big hit. But there's a version of it that I had always heard from a great duo called Grayson and Whitter. G.B. Grayson and Henry Whitter. G.B. Grayson was from Mountain City, Tennessee, and Henry Whitter was from over in Fries, Virginia. That's F-R-I-E-S. It's freeze in the winter, but it's fries in the summer. So I'm going to try and remember some of these words to Tom Dooley and play a little bit of it. Hang your head, Tom Dooley, hang your head and cry. Killed poor Laurie Foster, and you know you're bound to die. Met her on the hillside for to take her your wife. Met her on the hillside, and there you took her life. Took her by the roadside where you begged to be excused. Took her on the roadside, you hid her clothes and shoes. This time tomorrow, where do you reckon I'll be? Way down yonder in a holler, hanging on a white oak tree. Know they're gonna hang me, for tomorrow I'll be dead. Though I never even harmed o'er his head. Hang your head, Tom Dooley, hang your head and cry. Killed poor Laurie Foster, and you know you're bound to die. Time tomorrow, where do you reckon I'll be? Way down yonder in a holler, hanging on a white oak tree. At this time tomorrow, where do you reckon I'll be? Hadn't been for Sheriff Grayson, I'd have been in Tennessee. I can take down my old violin and play it all you please. For at this time tomorrow, boys, it'll be no use to me. Hang your head, Tom Dooley, hang your head and cry. Kill poor Laurie Foster, and you know you're bound to die. Okay. Get out of there. Let's see. Well, you know what? That's our morning song. That's a nice uplifting song to end on. Nice love song.
We're going to go out and look at the ground.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you guys for coming this morning. I'll just play something as you go out. So
Thank you so much.